Hello, everybody. This is Thor. Today, we are going to be taking a look at the new Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy's astrology chart. I'm going to be trying to get a sense of who Kevin McCarthy is, and then we'll look at what we can forecast for the immediate future based on the astrological karma that I see in the chart. Like many of you, I didn't know about Kevin McCarthy before this whole recent thing where he was being voted for Speaker of the House, and it took 15 different votes because there was this subsection of the Republican Party that was basically preventing him from becoming Speaker of the House. So there was this big drama that surrounded that. So I really didn't know much about him before that. So it's going to be interesting to take a look. For those of you that are new to my channel, make sure you like and subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you can get all of the notifications for my channel. Also, I do Vedic sidereal astrology, which is the astrology of ancient India, if you're new to this. So your sign may be different using Vedic astrology than it is with Western tropical astrology. You want to go to the appropriate calculators to determine what sign you are. If you're interested in a private reading, please check for details down below. I'm running a discount for the month of January, so you can check that out on my website. I'm going to also give a disclaimer at the beginning of this video. The astrology reading, this is for entertainment purposes only. All statements about Kevin McCarthy are alleged and based on my opinion of the astrological energies in the chart. So these are all allegedlys. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to get a sense of who Kevin McCarthy is based on the chart. And then we'll see, what I see, what can we gather, which may happen in the near term future, since he literally is third in line. If we look at like the line of succession, from the president, it's the president, then the vice president, then the Speaker of the House. So, I mean, it's a very important role to have. The former speaker was Nancy Pelosi. So let's take a look at the chart here and see what's going on with Kevin McCarthy. So I don't really have a bias about this. I don't really know. I'm very neutral about this, just so you know, if you're watching this. I don't really have an axe to grind. So if I say anything that doesn't sound too happy about it, it's just me reading the chart. All right. So Kevin McCarthy is a Taurus Ascendant. That means he's ruled by the planet Venus. And you'll notice there's a few things there that I find quite interesting when we're looking at the chart. First of all, there's Rahu in the first house. And I've noticed this with either a lot of actors or a lot of politicians that have Rahu in the first house. Remember, when Rahu's in the first house, the focus is on the self. So K2's in the seventh house. That means there's less focus on the others. There's less focus on the marriage partner or other people. So within this lifetime, it is very much focused on trying to develop the identity, the personality, one's social status. That's all very much highlighted. And I'm saying this in a non-judgmental way, because that's what Rahu means in a chart. We all have Rahu in the chart, and Rahu's always trying to advance itself for whatever house it's in. Now, when Rahu is in the first house, one of the things I do like to point out is it can create somebody who they're able to kind of, I would say, like a chameleon. They're able to blend in to different types of groups. They're able to change their persona because they're really experimenting with trying to find out who they really are. So they might actually join different groups and trying to in an experimental type of way. That's why I said earlier that they tend to be actors or actresses with Rahu in the first house. So it actually can be beneficial for an individual. However, the downside with Rahu in the first house is there can be too much of a focus on the self, where maybe you're not thinking about the effects on other people. So that's the downside. Now everybody has Rahu in their chart. So we all have the little, Rahu represents like the devil on our shoulder. So we all have it. It's not even, we're not trying to pick on him, but in the first house, there could be this idea of really trying to get into the limelight, trying to get noticed. Okay. The other thing I wanted to point out is Venus is in the eighth house of Kevin McCarthy's chart. And, the eighth house has to do with secrets, and it has to do with things like the occults, and it has to do with mysteries. So I feel like this is somebody who they like to do a lot of behind the scenes kind of deals. A lot of things are happening behind closed doors. So the eighth house would totally represent that. The things that are said not at the press conferences, the things that are said, in secret. So there's a lot of secret knowledge that Kevin McCarthy has. And I don't know how long he's been in politics for, but it would show that he's probably had some pretty high up roles within the government, especially considering Saturn in the 10th house. So that's something to take note. Also, I noticed that Jupiter's in the 12th house of the chart as well. Believe it or not, I mean, I'm looking at this chart here. If I saw this chart for anyone, I would say this person is very intuitive, even borderline psychic. Believe it or not, because we got K2 with Moon, which tends to make the consciousness very open to impressions around the environment, around people that he's around. So he can read people quite well. I can assure you of that. He's really good at reading people. He knows how to just get a sense of somebody, and okay, I know what this person's feeling. I know what this person's thinking. So for negotiations, I mean, this is a splendid placement for negotiations. Let me tell you that. Jupiter in the 12th house, this would make spirituality would actually be an important part in his life. I don't know if he is, I'm assuming he may be like a traditional Christian. I'm just making an assumption out there. But he might have a lot of esoteric knowledge as well with these planets in the eighth house and Jupiter in the 12th house. I feel like he's got quite a bit of knowledge. With this kind of chart, believe it or not, like the first lord in the eighth house could be somebody, and Jupiter in the 12th house could be somebody that became an astrologer. So maybe in another life, Kevin McCarthy was an astrologer or oracle. Who knows? This is kind of interesting. I'm noticing this as I'm reading the chart. Um, the one thing I did want to bring up is Mars in the fifth house of Virgo there. This is somebody who's super competitive. Okay, so fifth house can represent sports. It also can represent politics. It can represent royalty, a celebrity. So this person is tremendously competitive because Mars, wherever it is in our chart, it shows our competitive nature, our competitive edge that we have. And what I wanted to bring up was when I was watching this whole drama play out where they were having these votes in the House of Representatives of if Kevin McCarthy was going to be Speaker of the House. Well, they had like 15 of these votes. Correct me if I'm wrong on the number. And at some point, a lot of people were like, "Aren't you just going to give up on this? I mean, it looks like you're not going to get the vote." And he was like, "No." He was emphatic. "Nope, I'm going to be the next Speaker of the House." And that would be this right here. This would be Mars. Like, I'm going to do it. And I don't care how many votes this takes. It's going to happen. And it's a done deal. This is like, I'm competing to be number one here. So there is a lot of, it's almost like viewing politics as a sport or a competition. Like you want to be number one, you want to be at the top. That's what I see with this chart. So this is like a competitive nature, like being king of the hill here. So I wanted to bring up what Bukti Kevin McCarthy's in at the moment. So this whole drama with him being voted for Speaker of the House, I noticed it happened during a K2 Bukti. And, K2 Bukti is usually not a time, it's not usually a time where you like move up in the world. So I was actually quite curious of that. I was like, okay, K2 is usually the anti-social material planet within our charts. It's usually a time of loss. It's usually a time of things going wrong. It's usually a very spiritualizing time. But if we look at, the K2 periods he's in, it's a very short period of time from December of 2022 to April of 2023. That's how long this K2 Bhukti is. So it's a very short period. In astrological terms, this is very short. Okay. So usually if you see a big loss with K2, usually you need to be in the K2 period for a little bit longer, say like a year, 2 years, 3 years, or even the 7 years of K2 Mahadasha. So, you're not going to see a whole lot of loss generally within 4 months, because it does take, there is this thing called Dasha Sandy when we're talking about planetary periods, where once you enter a new planetary period, it's usually several months for that energy to really come online and establish itself. So it's not like it changes from, that day overnight. It's usually several months of this new energy buildup that happens when this occurs in your life. So if any of you change bhuktis or you change mahadashas, just wait, because a few months later is usually when you're seeing the full effects of the bhukti or the mahadasha. So let's go back to Kevin McCarthy's chart here. But I found it interesting that this whole thing. So, anyways, I'm bringing up the K2 period. He's in it from December to April of 2023. I found it very interesting because I was like, okay, the fact that it took 15 votes for him to become Speaker of the House, that was K2. Okay. That was like the astrological forces in his chart, you know, he was literally fighting a little bit uphill for that. It wasn't like the astrological influences were actually going against him on this. Okay. Because K2 has a separative influence in our charts. So the only thing that we can conclusively say that still got him the speakership was several factors in the chart. I'm going to point that out right now. What I see that got him is we got to look at what is K2's lord in the chart, because K2's in the sign of Scorpio. So K2's lord is Mars. Okay. So K2 tends to take on the characteristics of its lord and also any planets next to it. Well, Moon's next to it, and Moon is more of a passive, it's not really an outgoing type of yang energy planet. It's more of a passive planet. So K2 in Kevin McCarthy's chart is going to tend on to take the influences of its lord Mars. So this is what was able to get him that speakership, even though K2 was kind of like separating it. Mars forced it through. Okay. And like I said, the K2 energy is not tremendously strong anyways, because it's such a short planetary period. 4 months, like I said, usually K2 is not going to be, a total deal breaker over that short of amount of a time. If anything, it's just a little speed bump between planetary periods. Okay. The other thing that got Kevin McCarthy the speakership is, remember, Saturn just changed signs on January 17th into the 10th house of his chart. Let me tell you, his chart, if we look at it, Saturn in the 10th house, his natal Saturn is there as well. This is all about government leadership. A lot of world leaders actually have either Saturn in the first house or Saturn in the 10th house. So this is somebody, whether you like him or dislike him, he does have a lot of leadership qualities with Saturn in the 10th house. Saturn shows somebody who's going to bring a lot of stability to whatever organization they belong to. So Saturn is, but I don't feel like he's necessarily going to be this new innovative leader, because Saturn is like the old guard. So if you want to think about like the old hierarchies, or the age of Pisces, if we're talking about that, Saturn's going to represent more of the establishment, or what we consider the establishment. So in his governance style, when we're looking at that, it's going to be more hanging on to tradition, hanging on to the way things are done. Whether that's good good for the people or not, that's a whole nother discussion, but he's going to be trying to preserve the institution. The fact that he's having a Saturn return shows that this is going to be a mega crazy next couple years for Kevin McCarthy. And I feel like this is going to be probably the most eventful next couple of years of his life. Okay. Because Saturn returns tend to be extremely eventful. For example, most of you probably remember your first Saturn return at the age of 29 or 30 years old, and you just take a look at all the events that happened in your life. Well, that's Saturn. That's when Saturn, transiting Saturn, returns to its natal position in your chart. So when you're having a second natal, second Saturn return, there's usually a lot of drama accompanying that Saturn return. So I do feel like there is this idea as far as the government's going on. I feel like, and I've said this before in a general way, with Saturn entering the sign of Aquarius. Let me back up for a second. I did say in some of my predictions that with Saturn going into the sign of Aquarius, I feel like there's going to be like an economic crisis or some sort of crisis coming to the forefront pretty soon early on in this transit. Okay. So whether that be the next 3 to 6 months, we're kind of like yet to see. But Saturn is going into what we consider the natural 11th house, which represents economic networks, the stock market, Wall Street, those kind of things. Okay. So Saturn's going there. Usually, what's going to happen is there's some sort of big disturbance that's happening, and Saturn's going to be trying to rein that in. That's why I also predicted that I feel like there's going to be massive government interventions in markets over the next couple of years. Okay. Either an introduction of the UBI, a central bank digital currency, something's going to be introduced. Well, we tie this in the Kevin McCarthy's chart. Well, look, I mean, with his Saturn entering, having a Saturn return, I feel like a big part of his whatever he's doing is going to be maintaining the authority of the government, maintaining law and order, maintaining the institutions of the government. So he's going to be more of a stabilizing force in all of this. I do feel like, whether or not the media is portraying this, I do feel like he's actually going to I do feel like he's going to be cooperative with the White House. Okay, because of Saturn in the 10th house, like I said, it's all about preserving the establishment. It's all about preserving the old guard. So I don't feel like he's necessarily going to be a change shaker, a shaker of tremendous change or anything like that. I feel like he's going to be more preserving. And I do feel like he will make deals with who's ever in power. So President Biden, I do feel like he will work things out, even if in the media there's some sort of, political theater that's going on. And Mars in the fifth house could show political theater for sure. Now let's talk about what's the near future. I do feel like there's an emergency. Like I said, with Saturn entering Aquarius, I sense that there's some sort of emergency coming. Okay. And it's interesting, on April 19th of 2023, he's going to be entering Venus Bhukti for about 1 year. So from April of 2023 to April of 2024. Okay. Now, look at what Venus is. I mean, Venus is generally, you would think, oh, this is a really cool planet, right? Generally, it is. It's a fun planet. Like, let's party. It's time for Venus, let's live the good life, but not necessarily so in Kevin McCarthy's chart. Remember, like I said, Venus is in the 8th house, and it also rules the 6th house in his chart, and it also rules the 1st house. So when we're trying to interpret what does this Venus period mean for Kevin McCarthy, that's what we're looking at. Like, look at all these evil houses involved. We got the 8th house, the 6th house. So it's showing, and I'm feeling like I got this impression. I was just like looking at it and I'm like, okay, what kind of impressions am I getting about this? I feel like there's going to be some sort of emergency, and then his Saturn's here. So there's this idea of trying to keep leadership or trying to maintain stability during whatever this emergency is. Okay. The 8th house does represent things like bankruptcy. It does represent things like sudden tragic events. It does represent sudden type of things. He would be actually a good person to have in the government if there's an emergency because the first lord is in the eighth house. It shows somebody that would actually be pretty good at triage control or being able to respond to whatever is happening. And good old Saturn in the 10th house is going to have a very protective influence. Leaders are, it's really good for leaders to have a positive, a Saturn aspect on the 10th house, because it's like this sense of stability. They're not just they're not just going by the random, tides and winds of, the popularity contest. They really are in a governance kind of mode, okay? So I do feel like something's coming, and you notice the sixth house is being activated, and the sixth house either can represent things like war, imbalance, a debt crisis. I mean, this could represent a debt crisis. That is pretty crazy. Eighth house represents bankruptcy. Sixth house represents debt. Rahu's being Rahu's being activated as well, so it's unusual circumstances. So I feel like we're going to see something here in the first half of 2023. So let's buckle up. And I do feel like he's going to take a very conservative, traditional. Conservative's not necessarily the right word. More of a traditional stance. Okay, so let's preserve things as they are. Let's preserve the old order. Now, a lot of the newer generations, the millennials, Gen Z, maybe they're not that happy about that. Okay, because there's a lot of people that want to see a lot more change. And it doesn't matter if it's Democrat or Republican. A lot of people think that there's a lot of changes that need to be made to the system. So today I was reading the headlines, and I do feel like an economic crisis I do feel like it's looming. Okay. Uh, Apparently, a lot of customers allegedly have been missing money in their Bank of America accounts, allegedly. So I do feel like something's up, something's brewing, something is not right um, with everything that's going on. Of course, we know there's been a lot of stuff going on the last 3 years, so this shouldn't really come as a surprise. So this is what I got for Kevin McCarthy. I feel like there is a mysterious element to Kevin McCarthy with those planets in the eighth house and planets in the 12th house. But I also feel like, in a general way to the public, he's going to present a really traditional, conservative type of appearance. So thank you very much. Let me know down below what you all think about either Kevin McCarthy, or, send me suggestions of charts you would like to read, or just make a comment about whatever you want. So thank you so much, and I will see you all in the next video.